you're feeling all. start.
Madam Chair, we're ready to go. We're on air. Mic check should have
Great.
been at 8:30.
Okay. Okay, we can hear everybody. Great. So let's begin today's meeting of June 10th with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would join me in doing that for our meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Villalobos, do you want to proceed with the coverage announcement?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to the Commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSP-TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, San Marie, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcasts of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSP-TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Would you like me to continue to the roll call, Madam Chair?
Please.
Great. Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Park. Not yet, it looks like. Commissioner Farini.
Here.
Commissioner Blau.
Here.
And Chair Bradley.
Here.
Thank you. I'll try to contact Commissioner Park.
Okay, I'm sure he's on his way. All right, that brings us to item 4, the agenda status report. I see Secretary Wilson on screen. Do you want to give us that, Mr. Wilson?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you. In regards to the status of the agenda today, we have 2 items on the standard agenda. The first item is the continuance of the Brampton lot line adjustment. Staff's bringing back the revised conditions of approval for Commission to review and consider. Then the second item is the continuance of the Herbal Angels LLC cannabis operation, and staff is bringing back findings for denial for that project. And then I apologize, there are 3 items on the standard agenda. The third item is the discussion item with the process of appeals from the Planning Commission to the Board of Supervisors and related procedures in that regard. So those are 3 items on the standard agenda today.
Thank you, and I know that we have a time constraint because we've got the Montecito Planning Commission taking over the hearing space at 1 o'clock, so we need to wrap this up no later than 12:30. Is that a good estimate?
Madam Chair, that is correct. We should be concluding by no later than 12:30.
Okay. Very well. Then that would take us to public comment. Mr. Villalobos, has anybody filed a request for public comment?
Madam Chair, did you want to go over the projection report before we go to public comment?
I am so bad at that. Yes, I just fly right through this administrative stuff. Yes, Secretary Wilson, please do the projection report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the projection report, our next scheduled hearing is going to be June 24th. There are 3 items listed on that as of right now. The continuance of the Zaca Mesa, continuance of possible appeal, and the continuance of the applicant appeal of the Verizon at Casitas Pass. There is a chance that Council Appeal may ask for another continuance on that date, I think due to health constraints of the applicant. But we will know as time proceeds on that one. At our prior meetings, we canceled the hearing of July 1st. Our next hearing after that will be July 8th. And on July 8th, it is a rather full day. We have 2 consent items, and then we do have the appeal of the Holland Towns coming back, a cannabis operation, Castle Rock, appeal of the Castle Rock Family Farms, and then a briefing on state housing laws by Long Range Planning. After July 8th, we would be coming back on July 29th. And that is, we have a CEQA guidelines compliance thresholds update, transportation impact thresholds update as well, and then appeal of a cannabis operation in Carpinteria. The CP1 supply is listed for that date as well on July 29th. As of right now, August 5th does not indicate any items projected at this point. And then moving to August 12th, we have the Orchid Community Plan update, which is the Union Valley Parkway project that has been scheduled for August 12th. And then August 26th, we have a recorded map modification and SoCal Gas Natural Telecommunications Project is projected for August 26th. And then September 2nd, we have ExxonMobil Trucking. And then September 9th, we have scheduled a second day for that hearing or that item as well to conclude any public comment or get questions on the ExxonMobil. And then that takes the projection report to the end. And then there are 3 other projects that I keep talking about that we're still working on getting dates for. And those relate to Key Site 21, which is the residential development along Highway 1 and Orchid, and Key Site 3, which is off of Highway 101, and the Oasis project in Old Town Orchid. Those 3 projects, we're looking for dates either in August or September for those projects, as late as maybe October. But we're trying to, on Oasis, we're looking at wrapping up a few items related to the development agreements. That is probably one of the last things pending on that, and then we're trying to schedule a date for that. So those are the other 3 projects that we're looking at in the horizon for the commission to consider. That concludes the projection report at this time.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, you guys. Not. Hold on. Let me get my.
Chair Bright, we have a question for Mr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Wilson, thank you for the projection report. I must have an old one in front of me, but it said on June 24th was the Castle Rock Family Farms appeal. And did I hear you say that's been moved to July 8th?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeney, that is correct. In an earlier version of the projection report, I'm sorry, you may be looking at a prior version of the projection report. I'm looking at the most recent one. And Castle Rock was moved from June 24th to July 8th.
And was that someone's request, or is that a staff decision?
I think it's a little bit of both. We're working on getting the staff report done and coordinating with all the parties. And it was the June 24th date was not the one that we were able to meet, and so we moved it to July 8th.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Secretary Wilson, I see that these cannabis cases, they're all LUP appeals, correct?
Madam Chair, yeah, the Castle Rock is an LUP and CP1 is a CDP.
Okay. And what happened to the Polo Condos thing? That's not on the report at all. So it was on a couple months ago, but it's going to be a while before that's back, I guess. I'm
sorry, Madam Chair, what was that project again?
It was the condos by the Polo Club on Via Real.
Oh, thank you, Madam. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think you're talking about Polo Villas. And so the staff is working with the applicants and are working through some issues. So we've taken it off of the projection report and working out some issues that have come up, and we'll put it back on the projection report. And these are great questions, just so the commission again understands. This is a projection report, so these aren't hard and fast dates. Things will move depending on issues that come up or other items. So there is going to be a little bit of flexibility and movement. We try to keep things on the projection report the way that they're put on. We want staff to place them on an agenda date that is realistic. But at times, some things will move based on issues or other circumstances that arise.
Of course. No, I appreciate that clarification. I didn't mean to be pushy, just curious.
No, it's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Farina, I still see your hand up. Is that just... Never mind. Okay, well, with that, why don't we go to the public comment? Mr. Villalobos, did anyone submit a request?
Madam Chair, kind of. As the hearing was started, I received a request from Renee O'Neill, who was having trouble finding the link to set up the hearing, to sign up. So I would recommend maybe deferring that until we get her online. So if we could just table that for the moment.
Sure. Okay, then we go to Planning Commissioner's informational report. Did any commissioner have anything to add about this? No, I actually attended was a go-to meeting, Director Plowman, the Ag Advisory Commission last Thursday from a car in Ventura to the meeting all over the Central Coast. So, and I have to say that Ms. Plowman and Mr. Clement did a phenomenal report on a whole range of topics that the Planning Commission is discussing. You may recall that the Planning Commission had some interest in working with the Ag Advisory Commission a little more hand in glove, and so I just want to report the staff did a great job of explaining what we've been dealing with the cannabis cases and the ag employee units or ordinance amendment and all kinds of things that touch ag. So I was really pleased. I hardly said a thing other than I'm here and I just listened. So it was very illuminating. Okay, seeing no other comments on that, we could move to the minutes if everyone's comfortable with that. Okay, so does anybody have a motion to approve, or are there any corrections? I believe that Commissioner Cooney is going to say something here.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I forgot about raising my hand. In just one thing on the projection report, I know that it's reported in here that right at the very end, we continued a meeting, but we actually did that earlier in the meeting. It probably doesn't matter, Mr. Villalobos, as to where it happens. I believe it was before we started item 1, but I'm just throwing that out. If everybody's okay with it, I would move to approve these minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second, and sounds like we already had discussion. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll request a roll call vote. Mr. Villalobos?
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye. Aye.
Chair Bridley.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. So we still don't have Commissioner Park. If we get to the standard agenda, we may want to take a break to make sure he gets connected.
Okay, and how about Ms. O'Neill under public comment? Is she dialed in?
No.
How about director's report?
Director's report it is.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. A couple of things. We had our budget hearings yesterday at the Board of Supervisors, and they completed their action on the budget. They will be coming back in the fall to be reassessing based on what they learn from the state and from the federal government in terms of funding. They did, in theory, fund 1.5 FTEs for long-range planning so that we could complete the full work program. The reason it's 1.5 instead of 2 is that we're going to look at hiring them in the second quarter and determine whether or not there's sufficient funding available, but they're proposing to fund it with cannabis tax dollars. So that was a positive, but I think we just have to be cautious about it, and we'll know more in the fall. The other things are that we already know about is the Santa Rita is coming on the 14th of July. Helistop is coming on the 7th of July. And then our COVID ordinance amendments that you heard last week are going to the board on the 16th. And then the cannabis ordinance, as I think we discussed last week, is going to be heard on Thursday at the Board of Supervisors. They're going to finish their public comment. They had a lot of testimony, and they'll hear probably another 45 to 50 minutes of public testimony on Thursday, and then they will begin deliberations and ask questions of staff following that. In terms of the COVID issues, we're still in stage 2. Our offices are still closed, but it looks as though the governor is giving more guidance on businesses that can continue to open. I don't think all of that guidance has provided yet, but it would include things like gyms and bars and businesses like that. So the more I learn, the more I'll share, but I don't have any additional information other than they're working towards that and that the guidance will be coming out. We are in the process of in public counters and in our reception, but that won't be in until late June. So I will continue to keep the commission posted as we move forward. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm just looking at my notes that I wrote down.
Have some questions.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Freeney.
Yes. What's the progress of the COVID-19 amendment?
The ordinance amendments that you guys took action on last week?
Yes.
Okay, I mentioned that, and that's going to the board on the 16th of June.
16th, okay.
Yeah.
So
okay. Next week.
Were there any other questions from the commission on that? Okay, seeing none. So we have a request for public comment, I understand, from Mr. Villalobos, but she can only do a call-in. I don't know how to make a decision on this. We're doing pretty well. Is the commission okay if we actually accept one call-in? It's Renee O'Neill. Public comment. We love public comment. Okay, I'll make a decision. So, David, can you hear me? Go ahead and ask her to call in. Again.
Okay, give me a minute.
Welcome, Commissioner Park.
Muted.
You know, given the trouble I had getting in, I don't think we want to tell people trying to get in public comment by phone that they can't do it.
Well, if it doesn't happen on the first try, we'll move on. While we have a second, there's probably an opportunity for a break between item 1 and 2. So let's try to fit that in 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll we have to be off air by 12:30. So I think we can do that. So, Mr. Villalobos, any success down there? You know, really, it's not.
So,
are you trying?
So, yeah, there seems to be some confusion here. So, Renee does not want to speak on general public comment. It's actually, she clarified that she wants to speak on Herbal Angels. So we can move on.
Oh, okay. Okay. So then moving on with the agenda, that is kind of brings us to the end of our administrative time. And we would start with the standard agenda. So, Mr. Villalobos, are you ready to read the first item in the record, the Cramston outline adjustment?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request by Kevin Frampton, property owner, to consider the following 19 LLA 3, 19 RRM 1, and to adopt the mitigated negative declaration 20 NGD 4 pursuant to the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Okay, and Mr. Villalobos, do we have requests to speak under public comment other than the applicant?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can you repeat the question?
Do we have, how many requests to speak under public comment are there?
So we did get that one letter to read into the record, and we do have, we have 2 public speakers for this item.
Okay. Just budgeting minutes. Okay. then we would actually turn to our staff presentation, or actually ask for any ex parte disclosures. Does any commissioner have ex parte?
Yes. I had a telephone conversation with Susan Petrovich yesterday afternoon.
Okay, anybody else? And by the way, Commissioner Park, I'm not seeing a light for you on my screen. I'm not sure. Yeah, the hand wave thing isn't working for Commissioner Park, but Commissioner Cooney, did you have something to add? Not seeing
Is
hand
it
raised on
working
the
for me,
computer.
Madam Chair? Do you see a hand up?
Not on my screen.
All right, I'll just interrupt if I need to say something. Yes, I did have a telephone call from Susan Petrovich yesterday. That was the only part.
Okay, and I did as well yesterday afternoon. So, okay, well, with that, let's move to our staff presentation.
Good morning, Chair Bradley and Commissioners. My name is Travis Lee, and I will be presenting the Frampton Lot Line Adjustment and Record Map Modification Continuance Hearing. The project was previously heard by your Commission last Wednesday, where the Commission directed staff to revise the conditions of approval in order to address concerns related to what is permitted outside the building and development envelopes in regards to lighting, landscaping, and fire fuel management activities. In response, staff has proposed changes to the project description with the applicant's concurrence, as well as clarified allowable locations for external lighting, the timing of fuel management activities, reporting for the fire fuel management and habitat improvement plan, and excluding non-native landscaping species outside envelopes and fire fuel management zones. Additionally, staff has proposed a new condition to regulate fuel management activities outside of development envelopes and fuel management zones, as well as requiring compliance monitoring of the conditions of approval. The changes to these conditions have also been made to the proposed file mitigated negative declaration, as these conditions stem from mitigation measures in the MND. We have also suggested clarification for the external lighting condition on this new slide as follows. It has been modified to read as: no lighting shall be allowed outside designated building or development envelopes except at driveway entrances to demarc entry and driveway or road junctions to demarc a change in direction. With these revised conditions, staff recommends that your Commission approve the project, make the required findings for approval, and to adopt the mitigated negative declaration. That concludes staff's presentation. Staff is available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Does the Commission have any questions of staff at this time? I'm going to have to ask you guys to do something on the screen because I'm not sure the little hand raise on Zoom is working for me 100%. So I'm not seeing any questions from the Commission. So why don't we move to the applicant's time? Which I'm having, Mr. Lloyd, I saw you on the meeting room, so you have 4 or 5 minutes. Is that sufficient for you?
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have about a 10-second presentation, and that is that we accept the conditions as proposed by staff and appreciate their efforts in getting those turned around so quickly. And we encourage you to adopt the MND and take the recommended action by staff. I'm here for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the Commission for Mr. Lloyd? Ms. Blau.
Yeah, I do have one. Hang on one second. Let me get my I think it's condition number 31. Oh, I know it's here. I know what that. Here we go. Condition number 31. Mitigation monitoring required. 32 on the condition of approval. I just want to make sure the applicant has read that condition carefully. I looked at it last night, and I must tell you, there's no way I would ever agree to that condition. I want to make sure they know what it says.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Blau, yes, we reviewed all the conditions that were proposed, and the mitigation monitoring condition was a new condition added. In my experience, when you have other project conditions that require in the LUP process or subsequent processes with the application, that there is a mitigation monitoring application and procedure where staff can in fact have an application and the resources to check various plans and maps and have a methodology to enter into the county record compliance with the condition. So I was not surprised to see that added.
Well, my concern is that it talks about the staff's unlimited ability to charge money for their own time for consultants, archaeologists, biologists, and that bring up a deposit. Doesn't say how much. It also says that the director is the final arbiter of any dispute between you and the county. I just find that if I was a lawyer advising a client about that condition, county's ability to have an unlimited amount of money to extract from me and ability to enter into any kind of a for disagreement. I mean, no appeal process to anybody. I just find that condition a little bit abhorrent. I'm curious to hear about my other two commissioners that are lawyers, if they would actually allow their client to enter into that kind of a stipulation.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Blau, these issues I think go beyond this application and perhaps questions of reform on department procedures and whatnot. I have mentioned in public before that there's new indemnity forms that are required for an applicant to sign when they enter into the permit process. These indemnity agreements are wholly one-sided and weighted to the county. These issues are sort of the process that applicants go through and are not limited to this particular project in any way at all. So I'm not poised to debate those issues in the context of this application, but would be happy to participate in a broader discussion on reform of county procedures. We all can use reform. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. I see a request to speak by Michael Cooney. Commissioner Cooney, I'm sorry.
We've met, right, Commissioner?
Yeah.
All right. Yes, I just want to comment on Commissioner Blau's comment. I don't know where Commissioner Blau has been the last 10 or 15 years, but these are not more piling on by the county than has occurred before. But in the context of this hearing, I think it's very wise of Mr. Lloyd to accept the conditions. This is a very special site, and conditions have been added which will need to have county follow-up. And there's no question that there's going to be expense involved, and I agree with the county's by the applicant.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. I have some audio issues here. So at any rate. Commissioner Blau, did you have anything more to add to that? Do you have anything more to add, Commissioner Blau?
No, I don't. If the applicants agree to it, that's fine. I'm just telling you that if I were the applicant, I would do it. So I've said my piece.
Thank you. Your hand is raised. So, all right. So we have all the questions from the commission answered. And Mr. Villalobos, do we have some public comment requests?
Madam Chair, yes. Our first public speaker is Susan Petrovich.
Very well. Ms. Petrovich, I'm not seeing you in the hearing room, or maybe I'm missing it, but if you're ready to proceed, hopefully you can do this within 3 minutes. I don't think we have very many other speakers here. Is she here?
Yes, Susan is as an attendee, so if you're looking at the panel as list, that's why you're not seeing her. So,
Oh, thank you.
so
Yeah.
Susan, can you hear us?
My screen shows that she's muted.
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Susan.
Oh, great. Thanks. Every time we have one of these hearings is a new challenge. I did review the staff report, and I did submit to you a letter with suggested changes to the MND, and I believe that staff did an excellent job. I'm just trying to plug the holes here and make the MND consistent with your decision. Regarding the revisions to the condition, I think staff, or the revisions to the various conditions, I think the staff did an incredible job given the time allotted. As you know, these were not posted until yesterday morning, so I apologize for the fact that I kind of bombarded you with my comments, but there wasn't much time to do anything. To address the period between Planning Commission approval and the applicant or a future owner pulling a permit, I proposed the condition that I sent to the PC members and to the staff yesterday at 4:27 p.m. It gets very specific as to no earth movement, native vegetation removal, damage, etc., without fully complying with all the conditions from the minute you approve this project. To address the only additional potential ambiguity in the project conditions, I also tightened the staff conditions quite a bit, and I sent you a red line of that earlier in the day. I also spoke to Mike Lamonaco at the Carpinteria Summerlin Fire District. He is charged with monitoring brush clearing. He said that he found no record in the file on this property regarding the grading permit or brush clearing of any kind. And he kept asking me, why is that road there? He also informed me that parts of the road now have been paved with concrete. And again, he asked, why is the road to nowhere there anyway? And I did submit late in the day, I'm sorry, it wasn't until after his call, I did submit a picture of a concreted section of the road that my client went out and took after hearing about the fire department's comment. And then I also submitted a Tamara Klug letter clarifying native vegetation should never be bulldozed, but should be pruned to preserve the root ball. Finally, we can't undo the past, but we can prevent it from happening again. So I would ask that you incorporate my red lines into the conditions and add the new condition that prohibits future grading, et cetera, between your approval and a permit being pulled. Thank you.
Okay. Were there any questions from the commission of Ms. Petrovich? No, seeing none. Then we would go to our next speaker, Mr. Villalobos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next speaker is Glenn Alger. Mr. Alger, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you. The protections of the as provided by the 2001 conditions of approval for the native habitat, were not followed. And the extent of the bulldozing and the road construction is beyond anything desired by the fire department. We believe the planning department's revisions of the conditions of approval provide much greater protections for the sensitive habitat within the fuel management area. And if you include our suggestions, we don't alter the conditions, but we believe it will strengthen and clarify the conditions as they apply to the entire site. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Alger. So that would conclude our public comment period, and then we would bring it back to the commission. Does staff have anything they want to add in rebuttal to the public comment?
Yes.
Yeah,
Madam
Mr. Tuttle.
Chair. Thank you. Good morning. I just saw Ms. Petrovich's latest condition. I just reviewed that quickly. I hadn't seen it until now. The only thing I would say is that with a lot line adjustment and recorded map modification, it doesn't become effective until the map records, because the approval, much like a permit, isn't effective until it gets issued. An approval of a map or lot line adjustment isn't effective until the map records, because up until recordation, the applicant could choose to not move forward with the application and revert back to their prior approval. So I don't know that the planning commission would be in a position to be able to say that upon approval of the project today, that the conditions would become in effect. If you were interested in that type of condition, I would just recommend that you have the timing to correspond with the map.
Mr. Tuttle, can you say that again? If we were interested in something like that, you would suggest what exactly?
If you're interested in concept with Ms. Petrovich's suggestion, I would have the timing correspond to map recordation, not approval of the project.
Okay, thank you. And then, I talked to Mr. Stewart yesterday. Are you standing in for Mr. Stewart, Alex? Anyway, regarding this situation of the timing, efficacy of the conditions, I appreciate that a lot of it's going to be tied to the map recordation and the land use permit that results after that. And what we've heard from at least Ms. Petrovich and her client are that there's been a lot of activity before those steps. So I have a feeling her suggestion is to try to capture between today and whenever the map records and the LUP is issued. But what I understood yesterday from staff was, because there isn't a permit is going to be issued, it's essentially where it's been the last several years, it would have to go through just a regular zoning enforcement complaint process. So just want to make sure that the commissioners understand that it is in a little bit of an in-between time before the map is recorded. And the other thing that I understood from staff, which was really helpful, is that this is just a lot line adjustment and a modification to that building envelope. So it's a fairly simple permit, and we appreciate that the site has been worked on, intermittently, but it's not, again, like a major development plan. So for whatever that's worth for the other commissioners' consideration, maybe we can keep that in mind. Commissioner Park? You had your hand raised, Commissioner Park? I'm seeing you muted.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
question for Mr. Tuttle. I appreciate your point that any condition would really only take effect when the map is recorded. But could you not write a condition such that if the map is recorded, that one has to restore back to today's date? And that was the ambiguity in the original conditions, and it's kind of gotten us where we are, is that the original conditions said don't do these certain things, but that wasn't triggered until anybody applied for a permit. So we're kind of struggling with that. But could we not relate back to at least today's date in the conditions for when they get recorded? So if any damage that's done between now and the date of recording would have to be restored, which of course would mean the applicant wouldn't do it. Be smart, wouldn't cause. Would that work, Mr. Tuttle?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Park, in theory, that could work. I think from a practical standpoint, that could be challenging to monitor and enforce, just in terms of knowing if work had occurred, knowing what the condition of the site was, at today's point in time.
But don't we have the advantage of Ms. Klug's reports as to what's today, and of this staff report and the applicant's report? And of course,
yes.
Petrovich would be watching this like hawks. So I think you're right. There's always practical problems. This is one that seems to be well looked after.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Park, yes, we do have the information from the biological assessment prepared for the project. Ms. Klug's analysis, just to be clear, is based on sort of peering into the site. I don't believe it was ever Ms. Klug ever physically entered the property and did any formal investigation. But that said, yes, we do have baseline information that we could pull from if needed or if the case came up. We did add that condition regarding fuel management activities outside the development envelope and fuel management zones to sort of capture that issue, which was raised at the last hearing. And that would, again, become effective upon map recordation and is not tied to any future development. So the moment the map records, that any fuel management activities would be regulated in that case. And but you're right, there is this gap in time between now and map recordation, because they have a lot line adjustment is valid for 3 years before you have to record, as an example. So there could be a period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. And I see Mr. Cooney's hand up.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Cooney.
Madam Chair, on this subject, first addressing Mr. Tuttle's remarks, it is my concern that we could approve this project with the conditions that have been drafted by staff and approved by us very easily, but then a very long period of time goes by and we're back to relying on the applicant for maintenance of the property. And my question to Mr. Tuttle is, what if what remains of the protectable habitat is damaged during that period of time? What is our recourse? If zoning enforcement is called, what could they do before everything is destroyed again? For example, clear cut to allegedly protect for fire.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cooney, so if the map has yet to record, meaning that these conditions haven't been effectuated, say over the next couple of years before that happens, then we would have to rely on the ordinance and as well as conditions based on the current map. But as we've seen, those are problematic the way they are worded and associated with those. So the ordinance does have permit triggers for vegetation, native vegetation removal, tree removal, if it's within environmentally sensitive habitat and it exceeds a certain area. So that would be our fallback in the absence of being able to rely on these conditions of approval. That threshold is generally certainly much higher than what these conditions would cover. And so it could be a fair amount of work that could be accomplished before any permit is triggered under the ordinance.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cooney, if I could supplement or provide information for the commission to consider as well. This is a lot line adjustment, and I know there is some concerns and sensitivity to the area and the habitat that's out there, but it is a request to move some lot lines and building envelopes. And so to condition it on approval, it's not effective, as we indicated earlier, until it gets recorded. And as Commissioner Park had indicated, to have a retroactive condition. The other thing to consider is that this is just a request on adjusting property lines. And that would be contingent on whether or not the applicant actually goes forward with recording it. If the applicant doesn't go forward with recording and abandons it, then the situation remains as what we're discussing now. Our recommendation is to review the conditions that we provided today, and then working with fire and zoning enforcement on any issues in the interim. And that condition would be in effect whether or not they recorded the map. I don't know if we have a resolution to go back retroactively and have them restore something, and if there's something that's going to effectuate the action.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. When I first looked at this, I thought all these conditions, these issues, for lot line adjustment were inappropriate. Then I realized this is also a map condition modification. I'm not sure that everybody's thinking about this correctly. If I'd have had my druthers, I would have done this is a map modification and a lot line adjustment. The map modification is actually the main issue here. I'm not sure that we're all correct, that this all becomes effective upon the lot line adjustment being recorded. They're asking for a modification to the conditions of the earlier map. I think they become effective the day we agree to them. I don't think there's anything to necessarily report. So I would look at the county council to say, let's we're modifying the conditions of an earlier map and approving those modifications. The lot line adjustment is adjunct to that, not really a part of the modification of the map. So I do think they become effective the day we approve them. There's nothing, I mean, if you had a map that recorded earlier and there were conditions on that map, they're asking for those to be amended. Well, let's say they weren't doing a lot line adjustment. They're just amending the map condition. They would become effective the moment we approve them. So I've looked at county council to tell me that I've visited them.
Madam Chair, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Richardson.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Blau, my understanding is that the map modification would still require some sort of recordation. I'll defer to planning on the details, but I think there's still some sort of action that's required for the applicant to essentially effectuate and move forward with the modification. Because I believe they could have it approved today and then potentially, for whatever reason, decide not to go forward and it would not be effective, but perhaps planning has the details.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Blau, to reiterate or to add on to that. So with a map a map modification, there is a recordation process. Generally, it is accomplished through what's called a certificate of correction. It's a fairly straightforward process done through the surveyor's office, but it does have the effect of recording the change to the map. And then a lot line adjustment would go through a similar process of recordation through, there's a couple of different ways that a lot line adjustment can be recorded as well. But in both cases, there is a recordation process in slightly different fashions that would effectuate the approval to have those conditions come effective.
So how long does the applicant have to do the recordation of the correct map correction? Of course, the next
3 years, I thought you said.
Can we limit that? Can we say that you do corrections in 60, 90 days, or I get that you got 3 years to do a lot of adjustment, but what's the time frame that we can set on the correction you want?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Blau, I'm trying to look that up. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the timeline is for a map modification.
Okay, I mean, do we want to take a couple minutes and let staff look that up, or? I'm okay. I think this is a pretty important issue, and Commissioner Cooney, it's your district, so I sort of looking for you to concur.
Yeah, actually, Madam Chair, Commissioner Blau, so condition 34 on the map recordation, or on the map modification, specifies that the modified map also has a 3-year timeline before it would expire. So both the lot line adjustment and the recorded map modification would be in effect for 3 years before it would expire.
And do we have any discretion to change that time frame, or is that by statute or by ordinance?
I believe that is by statute and ordinance.
Well, you believe it, but can you?
Well, the condition references the Subdivision Map Act in Chapter 21 of the Santa Barbara County Code. So that's what I'm going off of.
Okay.
As Madam Chair, Commissioner Blau, yeah, state law outlines the length of the MAP Act and Division 20 or Chapter 21 as far as the timing for recordation. Just to reiterate what we talked about earlier, there are options for if there is a restoration or activities on the site that would be in violation. Then today the request is a map modification and lot line adjustment. If there's any activities out there that would be a violation of either the fire code or zoning, we could take enforcement actions. In addition, if there's any entitlement for development, either land use permit or anything else, and at that time, if there is activities that are inconsistent with what we're trying to accomplish today, we could require restoration on that additional development permit. And that would be more appropriate to require restoration during that development permit. If anything happens from today until a map gets recorded, there are options down the road to either enforcement or restoration activities on a development permit that we could require that to occur.
Okay, I have a question. I see that Mr. Lloyd can probably help illuminate us, but let me just keep it at the commission for a second. So, Mr. Wilson, you're saying that you can't actually issue the land use permit until after the map records, after this revised map records, right? So when you're referring to a land use permit that is going to capture these conditions, maybe I misunderstood. Could you clarify?
Yeah, Madam Chair, to be clear, what I'm talking about is the request today is a map modification and a lot line adjustment. We're not approving any development today. We're approving moving a line on a map and a development area. In the future, if there is any development proposed, then there would be a permit required for that. And at that time, staff could review the conditions of the property and either put conditions on that development project to require restoration if activities occurred between now until the map's recorded. So there's future actions, other entitlements that's going to be required for any development to occur on this property. So I wasn't saying that these conditions would follow a development project. I'm just saying that there's another option for staff and the department to evaluate conditions on the site. So one is once the map's recorded, these are conditions that will be in place and effectuated. And then again, staff will be able to, any development entitlements that's pursued on this property, staff could look at the site as well in that context.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I think as an example, the negative declaration and analysis indicates that there's a handful of oak trees within the development envelope. So if they come in for future development application and we discover that those trees are gone, been removed, as an example, we have the documentation to be able to go back and say these trees existed at the time of your approval, and we could require rehabilitation or restoration based on that change that has been observed.
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. Okay, I'm not seeing any other commissioner have any questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Mr. Lloyd, go ahead.
Thank you,
Hello.
Madam Chair, honorable commissioners. It's it's the applicant's intent to cause the recordation of the required documents as soon as possible. With that said, I don't control the process of checking of documents and return with any revisions or corrections, but it's our intent to make a submittal these documents very quickly within days and to proceed with the recordation. I didn't intend to get into the issues as to what occurred on the property in the past. There's been a lot of allegations. That's not.
So, like, I'm sorry, Mr. Lloyd, we actually closed the public comment period. So I'm afraid that I sort of need to bring it back to the commission. And I see Commissioner Park's hand raised. So thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Commissioner Park?
Yes, again, this is a question of staff, and I really appreciate Mr. Wilson's comments just now. I think it really helps us out, and I want to kind of further that point. Our staff works 24/7 understanding these things and does a very good job of laying out the applicable regulations and codes and stuff to us, which we're at a loss to understand it as well as they do and present it as well. And I think we're not using our staff properly if we just sort of challenge, oh, well, what if this or what if that? So I think the best way to do this is say what we want and ask staff to tell us, can we do it and how to do it? So instead of me arguing with Mr. Tuttle about, can you do this or can you do that? I'd rather just say, this has been a property where there's a question of abusive conditions over the years and it's deteriorated. And we want to stop that. We want to stop it now. So how can we do that? Tell us the best way to do it. That's a question.
That's a question. Okay,
yeah. Alex, you're up.
So we could, if we want to be explicit, to sort of echo what Mr. Wilson was indicating, is we could add a condition that essentially says, at the time, and I think it's probably best time to correspond with future development, but at the time of future development, any change to the condition of the site with respect to removal of native vegetation, grading, ground disturbance, etc., would need to be restored back to its condition at the time of project approval. Something to that effect. And that would just make explicit what I think staff would already be attempting to do in their review of project in that situation. But at least it would give some guidance that that's the expectation and intent of the approval.
Well, I really appreciate it. I think that's what I was getting at earlier with my first question. Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. I really appreciate it.
And I sort of have a follow-up to that. So Mr. Tuttle, in that model, what would be our baseline condition? Would it be what staff documented for the MND for this case, the recorded map mod, or we can't really rely on Ms. Klug's assessment because it wasn't on site. So how do we capture the physical conditions of the site today?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, I think the documentation and analysis that we have that inform the mitigated negative declaration would be our best resource, as well as aerial imagery that is constantly being updated and being able to look back and change in circumstance.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't see any other commissioner having any other comments. So it's a first district case. This rather brings it back to Commissioner Cooney. Tag, you're it.
Okay, Madam Chair. There were a number of conditions, as you know, suggested by Ms. Petrovich late yesterday, and I had a chance to go through those, but as a matter of process, I don't know if we need more time today or otherwise. We don't have much time today, but if it's appropriate and the rest of the commission agrees, I would suggest which of those proposed changes to the conditions of both the lot line adjustment and map modification that I would like to see incorporated as she suggests.
That sounds acceptable to me. So we would be going through that transmittal from yesterday, and you just want to go condition by condition, or that's okay.
It won't take long. I'll just indicate which ones I would like to see, and if there's support for that, we can incorporate them. I will say at the outset that while all of the suggestions of Ms. Petrovich and her client are reasonable, but when it goes to certain affirmative actions that we require the applicant to take, I think I hesitate there because we haven't traditionally expected that in areas similar to this. So I'll just point those out as we go. So I'm starting on the lot line adjustment conditions of approval, and in the project description, which is the very first item. I think it's appropriate to put some identity to the various descriptions, and Ms. Petrovich suggested labeling them A, B, C, D, and adding the word ripping in there. I don't have a strong feeling about adding that because I think the other provisions are broad, but I do agree that we should break that sentence down. It reads better and would be more clear to the applicant in the future and the public. That was the first one. I don't know if you want to have input, but maybe it's best if I just race through the ones I would suggest, and then others can add or subtract.
Okay, Commissioner Cooney, before you proceed, I see Ms. Richards' hand up, so maybe we need to take a minute and hear from County Council.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cooney, I just wanted to say, in terms of the project description, any changes to the project description, the applicant would need to agree to. So the commission does have discretion to change the conditions unilaterally, but for the project description, you may want to ask Mr. Lloyd, or if they're not willing to make that change, perhaps you could make the change in a related condition.
Thank you. Maybe the thing to do is to go through all the conditions, and then we can confirm with Mr. Lloyd once you're done.
Yeah, I think it's important that Mr. Lloyd and his client accept the conditions. So he may not even be aware of them. I'm not sure if Ms. Petrovich sent her communication of late yesterday afternoon to Mr. Lloyd. If that's the case, I don't think it's fair to ask him on the spot to agree or not until he's had a chance to read through them. So maybe we could ask Mr. Lloyd that at the outset, and if so, we're just not going to be able to proceed with this application today.
Okay, well, I told Mr. Lloyd he couldn't take any more time because we were in deliberations here. So, and I'm actually seeing him muted and on video. Does anybody know if he's still with the meeting? You don't know. Oh, there, Mr. Lloyd.
Madam Chair.
I shooed you away too early. Are you in receipt of Ms. Petrovich's transmittal yesterday?
No, I was unmuted and off of video as I was going over to my other computer to go onto the county website to see if I could recover these, and I don't see anything other than her and the county's side.
So you saw the markup, the red line markup that she had posted on the website?
They haven't recovered that yet. I'm going through the document.
Madam Chair, Commissioners,
All right.
perhaps we could pull her comment letter up onto the screen. We could try that approach.
That's a great idea. Commissioner Cooney, you okay with that?
Yeah,
I know
I'm just, if Mr. Lloyd would benefit, we could take a 10-minute break now and let him look through her suggestions before I go through them, because some are easier to accept than others, and he's going to have to do that at some point.
That's true.
And Madam Chair, I think, taking a break is probably a good suggestion. I just want to give some direction to Mr. Lloyd on where to find that comment letter on the website. So if you go to the County Planning Commission.
I have found it, and I'm printing it out now.
Okay.
So, Mr. Lloyd, what we said was we'd take about a 10-minute break, and hopefully you can speed read through them, and that way when Mr. Cooney goes through them, you're not on the commission, but we are looking for your concurrence. So
thank you, Madam Chair,
with
for the
that,
opportunity.
Okay, so with that, let's just take a 10-minute break and resume. We're making okay time, so we're okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we're back on the air whenever you're ready.
Madam Chair, this is Secretary Wilson. Before we begin, if it'd be okay if I just announce to the public and other commissioners what document we're looking Madam Chair, I don't know if you're on mute or if you're back with us or not.
Okay, yeah, here I am. Sorry, I accidentally hung up on the meeting. I'm back. Go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Chair, staff is bringing it up on the screen as well, but if you, on the county website under the County Planning Commission, the 2020 folder on June 10th, 2020, under the Frampton or lot line adjustment, recorded map modification folder, it is the document labeled public comment letters, and it would be page 5 of that document, I think is where Commissioner Cooney had began.
Okay. And, thank you to Mr. Villalobos. He reminded me that actually we need to vote to accept Ms. Petrovich's letter into the record because it exceeded our minimum and it was submitted technically less than 24 hours. So before we move any further, let's go ahead and look for a motion to accept it in the record officially.
So
Seeing anyone? Okay,
Yes.
Mr. Cooney, and second?
I second.
Okay, thank you. Did you get that, Mr. Villalobos?
Yes.
Do you want to call the roll call for that?
Yes. Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeney,
No.
Commissioner Blau,
No. No.
Chair Bridley.
Aye.
Motion fails by a vote of 3-2. So as a reminder, these require a 4-1 vote, 4/5 vote.
All right. Well, then that means we don't consider it, correct? All right. So now I'm a little lost up here, people.
Madam Chair, if I could step in for a second. Yeah, that motion failed 4-1 to accept those into the record. If you wanted to do that, option would be to continue this item to another date, and then the item would be part of the record at that time, and then you could consider them at a future hearing. Otherwise, there could be other motions on the project based on the information that is in the record at the time today.
Okay. Commissioner Cooney, thank you.
If I could weigh in.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think, okay, we could disregard for purposes of the vote just taken, accepting this document into the record, but I had already added a number of changes I was going to suggest to the commission today before I received anything from Ms. Petrovich. So I'm going to go ahead and suggest those changes, and we can vote on those as if Ms. Petrovich never sent her letter.
I think that is completely fair. Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that although I don't agree it goes into the record, doesn't mean that Commissioner Cooney can't pull out parts of that letter or that comment and suggest it be, make changes to the conditions or make changes to the description. I have no objection to doing that. And so if he wants to go through there and simply use parts of it to modify the condition of approval, I have no disagreement with that. I have never, I will ever have agreed to put something in the record that's more than one page that we get at the last hour. Doesn't mean you can't use it, to make modifications, and I would, if he does that, I will probably agree to it.
Thank you, Commissioner Blau. And Commissioner Farini, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain my no vote to Commissioner Cooney. There were many emails from Ms. Petrovich that came through yesterday, and I simply did not have time to go all through those in the detail that I think I would have needed to have done. There were multiple drafts sent out, and in the end, I ran out of time on that. And so I don't feel comfortable. I think that's why that rule is there, right? If these long letters are put into place, we need time to properly analyze them. So that it's not that I'm against what Commissioner Cooney, what you're setting out to do. I support that, and I know you're handling the process. I felt that was too much information and a bit overwhelming. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Farini. So I think that Commissioner Cooney still stands with you because you had corrections anyway. So I'm not hearing anything from the commission saying that we don't want to proceed with that. So I would turn it over to you.
Okay, Madam Chair, I just, as a preface in response to my fellow commissioners' concerns about the way these matters came in, I think Ms. Petrovich mentioned that the proposed conditions of approval, which were worked on and revised by staff to begin with, weren't posted publicly until yesterday. I maybe Mr. Wilson can confirm that, but that explains why her materials came in so late. And I generally agree that we need to be hard and fast with our public comments coming in on the eve of the hearing. But we do have extraordinary circumstances where it was only continued for a week. And I think what I prefer here is that we not continue it. It's all fresh in our minds as a project, that I propose the changes that I had written down before hearing from Ms. Petrovich. And then a couple that she suggested that I agreed with as well. But there are several that I don't. So I'll just start with my own comments on the lot line adjustment that was released by staff. I'm not sure if I got it yesterday or the day before, but I have the document. It doesn't have page numbers, but that's what I'll use with regard to suggested changes.
Okay, and Commissioner Cooney, I see Mr. Farini's hand up, but that might be a leftover. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cooney, take it away.
Okay, back to the first page of the lot line adjustment project description, item number 1. I wish I had lines to refer to here, but about halfway down the page, the sentence begins, no ground disturbance, including grading, vegetation removal, and so forth. And what I did was put in numbers for those separate references. So the first would be number 1 in front of grading, number 2 in front of vegetation removal. That's a long section. Let's see, after improvement plan, I would insert the number 3, and then number 4 in front of development. So that's just a clarification issue, not a substance issue. I didn't change any wording. Okay, if everybody's ready with those, I'll go to the next one, which is on section 6, lighting. And I would like to amend the first sentence of lighting to add the words "or onto the public roadway" as far as lighting escape. So it isn't just spilling onto adjacent properties, but to the roadway adjacent to it. We could use the word Sheffield Drive if staff would. Okay, then number 7, staff suggested special treatment for Santa Barbara honeysuckle, and wherever they did, I'd like to add in the other prominent protected species which occur on the site: Nuttall's oaks and coastal scrub. And those protected species show up several times in several conditions, and I'll just point out as we go. Nuttall's oaks, California walnut trees, and after FFMZ and throughout the remainder of the property outside the development envelope.
Commissioner, can you please repeat that last part, please? Thank you.
Yes, so we're still dealing with that long first sentence. Add Nuttall's oaks, California walnut trees in front of N native grassland. Within the FFMZ is in this text right now, and then add the following words: and throughout the remainder of the property outside of the development envelope during fire fuel management operations. It's just expanding the specifics of what needs to be protected.
Commissioner Cooney, I don't want to interrupt you. You're on a roll, but you know that same Nuttall's oak, chaparral, and coastal sage scrub was in condition 9. Did you want to include it there?
Yes. Sorry.
So second line of that condition: the Nuttall's oak, the chaparral, and coastal scrub, and then again
after Santa Barbara honey. Right.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, just to clarify, before Commissioner Cooney on condition 7 had just referenced the Nuttall oak trees and coastal sage scrub. Was it your intention to include the chaparral in that category?
I think so. I omitted it because chaparral is a general term to all of the other plants. So I was trying to identify the specific plants. But if there are other protected plants, and the chaparral itself is protected, I believe, by county code, we should include it here. Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. So that would apply to conditions 7, 9, and 11.
Chair Bradley, Commissioner Cooney, for condition 7, would you also like to include to map the California walnut on the species occurrence on construction plans as well?
Yes, thank you. That would just be consistent. Not too many more. Further in condition 11, there are a series of paragraphs that are identified, and the only one I'd like to address is the very last one. The plan shall include a 5-year maintenance and monitoring period. And then I would just add the words to ensure restoration of native vegetation outside the development envelope. Let me know if anybody needs that repeated.
Commissioner Cooney, where exactly was that? You're on condition 11?
The last dot of condition 11.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. Got it.
The next one is condition 13. It begins wood rat nest, and I would add the words "and California walnut trees" in the title. Wood rat nest and California walnut trees, and then add the words "and California walnut trees" in the second line, still in that first sentence, and also where in the sentence that begins, if the nest or California walnut trees can be avoided, they shall be surrounded with construction, fencing, etc. It's really throughout that paragraph just adding California walnut trees as a protected species. So under plan requirements, it begins wood rat nest and California walnut trees. And that's the last place it occurs. I'm hesitating to see if anybody didn't follow that.
I'm not seeing anyone's hand raised. I'm with you.
Okay. Most of the rest of these are just form. In condition 14, under plan requirements and timing, it begins if vegetation removal, ground disturbance, and construction must begin within the breeding season. I think the proper word is or instead of and. That is, if any of those things begin within the breeding season, then the rest of the paragraph applies. That's or for and. And condition 18, the second line has an error. It includes upon, the word upon, and then the word within 30 days. We can just eliminate upon. Condition 24 begins, the following language shall be included on the deeds. And I think it clarifies it to say each of the deeds used to finalize the lot line adjustment. Just adding the words each of after included on. Okay, condition 27. It refers to fuel management zones, outside fuel management zones. I'd like to insert the words development envelopes and fire fuel management zones in the third line. Outside the designated development envelopes and fire fuel management zones. And that was it. Now the same conditions recur in the map modification. And I would just ask staff and the commissioners to, if they're going to agree with me on the lot line adjustment, to accept that staff would insert those same provisions where they occur in the map modification.
Okay, very well. And just for clarification, Commissioner Cooney, I'm assuming that where there were staff corrections, those were acceptable to you, and what you just went through was additional text changes on top of staff corrections, correct?
Absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this includes portions of a project description change, and then we would need to have, if not seeing any questions from the rest of the commissioners, it would be prudent to go back to Mr. Lloyd to confirm that he's okay with the project condition change, project description change, I'm sorry. So, Mr. Lloyd, you're still there. Thank you for hanging on with us.
Yes, Madam Chair, how are you? Thank you. The proposed amendments or revisions to the conditions are acceptable to us, except for the one, and it's the requirement in both condition 11 and further down in 11, where the fire fuel management plan is being expanded to cover areas throughout the remainder of the property outside the development envelope and the FMMZs. And we are required by the fire department to have a fuel management plan, or the fire department requires certain fuel mitigation to happen within certain zones up to 100 feet. We voluntarily put in our project description a fuel management plan for that area, and it is in the conditions of approval. We don't intend, as to any development in the development envelope or building envelope, to have fuel modification associated with the development of those envelopes to occur outside of the required 100-foot area of treatment that the fire department will require. I know that this is triggered by concerns that may have occurred outside, that there is outside of the existing development envelopes or fuel management zone. And there is a desire, we can see from the Planning Commission, to correct that ambiguous nature that was perhaps resulted from the 2001 map. We believe that the language of the conditions as they are tightening and closing that ambiguous state, and that by requiring us to treat the whole property for fuel management is outside the scope or regulations that the fire department is requiring of us, and we have no intention to do any of that. There are conditions that says if in the future, perhaps post-construction of the development envelope, if there is the need to have some fire fuel mitigation as a request from the fire department, that there are procedures in the conditions. So I would ask not to include this expanded area as related to development in the development envelope and the operation scope and extent of the fuel management zone. I would ask that we not include that language that says and throughout the remainder of the property outside the development envelope.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lloyd. That brings it back to the commission. And Commissioner Cooney, I'm sorry, Commissioner Parks, you had a comment?
Actually, it's a question, and maybe it's a question of you, Chair Briley. I thought that Commissioner Cooney was talking about conditions of approval, and then you said something about let's go back to the applicant because he needs to approve any changes to the project description. But I thought that we're talking about conditions of approval that don't need the applicants.
That's correct. And I could have interrupted Mr. Lloyd, but you know, he's been with us, so I let him have the 3 minutes. So now we're back to commission deliberations only. Mr. Lloyd is off the docket, so to speak, and we're back to the commission for consideration, Mr. Cooney's correction.
Of the conditions of approval. So we're not talking about the project.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners.
Mr. Tuttle.
Just a couple points of clarification, and for what it's worth, the new condition that we had added, condition number 27 of the lot line adjustment, does account for fuel management activities outside the development envelope and fuel management zones. So that would make sure that any fuel management that is required to occur outside the envelope and fuel management zones is subject to the same mitigation measures applicable to fuel management within the fuel management zones. So that was our attempt at making sure that there is some management and regulation of fuel management throughout the site to address Commissioner Cooney's concern. So I just want to point that out. And then in your consideration of the lighting condition, Mr. Lee had proposed on the last slide a minor tweak to that language to clarify the intent of where lighting is allowed. So perhaps in your deliberation, your commission could speak to whether or not you are supportive of that change as well. And then I do have draft language for your consideration if you're interested in that address Commissioner Park's comment before we took the recess.
Okay. Did you want to put something up on the screen for the aesthetic, the lighting condition, or I'm not seeing anything on the screen? Did you mean to do that, Mr. Tuttle, or there we go. Thank you.
The idea there is that there is that driveway serving lot 2 does have a turn where it forks with the driveway continuing down to the development envelope and then the rest of the driveway heading up towards the far corner of the lot. So having a lighting at that junction down to the development envelope on lot 2 was considered appropriate. And so the language attempts to account for that.
And is this condition 6, you guys?
This is condition 6, yes.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Park?
Yes, I wonder if we could also see the language that Mr. Tuttle just mentioned that was responsive to my request.
Mr. Tuttle, got that one?
I can read it. Just we didn't have time to kind of put it up on the screen, but I can read it to you. That works.
That would work just fine. And I just want to know if, in particular, Commissioner Cooney approves of it as part of his.
So here's what we came up with. At the time of approval, this would be a new condition that we would add. And it could follow right after the condition 27 that was added. So it could be a new condition 28. And at the time of approval of future lot development, any removal of native vegetation, including trees, that has occurred from the effective date of approval of the lot line adjustment and reported map modification shall be restored as part of the land use permit approval. The county qualified biologist shall compare the nature and extent of native vegetation on the site to the conditions present at the time of the lot line adjustment, reported map modification approval, and make recommendations for restoration as appropriate as part of the fire fuel management and habitat improvement. Period.
Madam Chair, I think we lost Commissioner Park. Actually, I think we lost. Madam Chair, you there?
I'm here.
I don't know if
I see
Commissioner Park. Were you?
I see Commissioner Park on my screen.
I may be lost in my mind, but I'm not lost externally.
All right, my apologies. I somebody left the hearing and I couldn't find you on my thumbnail. Sorry, Commissioner Park. I just want to make sure you could hear what was being.
You didn't say anything my wife doesn't say.
Okay. So we have that additional condition from Mr. Tuttle and addressing Commissioner Park's request, and Commissioner Cooney, I guess the question is, do you concur with that too?
I do.
Okay. So with
Thank
all
you, Mr.
those
Tuttle.
correct, with all of those corrections, I know we're still looking for a motion, technically. That was discussion.
Yes. I was looking for what staff proposed for the motion before. I think it's in, okay.
It's on the front of his memo.
Yeah. I don't find staff's memo among these piles of paper I have here quickly, but my motion would be to support staff's recommendations. If we could get identification of the memo date.
I've got it for you, Mr. Cooney. Make the required findings for the project as specified in attachment A of the Planning Commission staff report dated May 14th, 2020, including sequel findings. And then item 2, adopt the revised final MND 20 NGD 004 and adopt the mitigation monitoring contained in the conditions of approval included as attachment C of the staff report dated May 14th. I think this motion has to include also today's consideration. Oh, and as revised by attachment B of the staff report dated June 8th, 2020. And then item 3, approve the project case numbers 19 LLA 0003 and 19 RMM, subject to the conditions of approval included as attachment A to the Planning Commission staff report dated June 8th, 2020. And maybe you're saying as amended.
Yes, exactly. So that's the motion I placed before the commission as I proposed with respect to the changes to the conditions.
Well, I'll second that motion. Let's keep it really tidy here. So is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, then Mr. Villa, Commissioner Park.
I don't mean to be stupid. I just want to make sure with all I just includes the changes that Commissioner Cooney suggested and also Mr. Tuttle's changes that were responsive to me. That all included in the motion. Okay. Thank you.
As amended, which meant everything discussed today, as amended on June 10th.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, Commissioners, just to clarify, there was a question on condition 11 and the fuel management plan. Just wanted to be clear on what our direction is on that. Whether it's to include that additional language.
That Mr. Lloyd objected to, right?
Correct.
So Commissioner Cooney, I'd turn to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would like to see, just as Mr. Tuttle indicated, he has done in condition 27. What we're talking about here is including the Nuttall's Oaks and along with the Santa Barbara honeysuckle and others throughout the remainder of the property outside the development envelopes during fire fuel management operations. Period. And then the next sentence say the same thing. The plan shall address how native vegetation within the FFMZs and throughout the remainder of the property outside the development envelope, so on. So those two changes are part of my motion.
All right, and the seconder agrees. So with that, staff, hopefully everyone's clear on how this is going to be written up. And seeing no other questions from the commission or comments, I would ask Mr. Villalobos to proceed with the roll call vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Park.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau. Was that an aye, Commissioner Blau?
Aye.
Great. Chair Bradley.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, does staff need any time to switch to our next? You want to take maybe 5 minutes to get everybody geared up for item number 2?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That would be much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. So back here at 11:05. So, here's my dog. Oh, you know what?
Madam Chair, we're back on the air whenever you're ready to start the next item.
Anybody hear me? Okay. So this brings us to item 2 on our agenda. Mr. Villalobos, can you read that into the record, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Zoe Carlson, agent for the applicant Herbal Angels LLC, to consider the following case numbers 18 CUP 32, 18 DVP 9, and 19 CUP 35. Applications filed on October 3rd, 2018, and July 24th, 2019. The proposed project is an activity within the scope of the Board of Supervisors approved Cannabis Land Use Ordinance and Licensing Program Environmental Impact Report 17 EIR 3.
Thank you. This is when we would ask for any commissioner that wants to have any ex parte or site visit disclosures. Oh, you know what? I'm not on the wrong screen. Sorry. Not seeing any. Then let's move to the staff presentation.
Peter Bradley.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, John. Commissioner Park, go ahead.
I received emails and texts from different people just saying thank you and stuff like that. I guess that's an ex-party contact, but I don't remember who and what and so on and so forth, but I'm saying it.
Thank you. Okay, seeing nobody else, then we would go to our staff presentation. See Mr. Peterson in the room.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Stephen Peterson, and today I'll be presenting to you the Herbal Angels Cannabis Project. This project was last seen by the Commission on May 27th, at which time the Commission continued the project with direction to staff to prepare findings for denial. I wanted to mention that today in my presentation, I'll only be covering the first 2 slides on the PowerPoint. There were several more included just to be there on an as-needed basis if the commission did return to discussing any of the previous issues, but I'll only be covering the first 2 slides today. So, staff did prepare findings for denial, 8 of them, and those are included with attachment A to your Planning Commission memo for today. There is one small correction I would like to note in those findings. Finding 2.2.5 in the non-bolded second half in the 4th line where it says incompatible, that word should be changed to say compatible, as the finding is that the commission is finding that the project will not be compatible with the surrounding area. So we'd like to remove the IN there. Otherwise, the findings for denial are as written in attachment A. So our recommendation to you for today is to make the required findings for denial of the project as they're laid out in attachment A, including the CEQA findings and the correction that I just noted. Determine that denial of the project is exempt from CEQA and deny the project. That concludes my presentation. Staff is available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Does the commissioners have any questions for Mr. Peterson? Okay, seeing none, we would move to our applicant presentation. I see Ms. Carlson on the screen.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, are you okay with like 5 minutes, Ms. Carlson? I didn't check in with you earlier. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So good morning, Chair Briley and commissioners. For the record, my name is Zoe Carlson. I'm the agent for the Herbal Angels Avo Vista project. I am asking you for your determination on this project today for the 4th time. Our application was deemed complete on August 15th, 2019. And since that date, county staff has recommended our project for approval on 3 separate occasions, which were December 4th, 2019, April 8th, and again on May 27th of this year. Unfortunately, despite staff's recommendations, we have been waiting for your decision on this project for more than 6 months. Delaying your decision on during the last 2 hearings has caused 2 additional months of unnecessary delay in our ability to take this project to the County Board of Supervisors. And we look forward to your decision on the project today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Does the commission have any questions of Ms. Carlson? Seeing none, then we would bring it back to the commission, and actually this would be the time for public comment. Mr. Villalobos, is there any request for public comment?
Madam Chair, we do have 2 requests for public comment. One is from Ms. Citron, and the other is Ms. O'Neill. I've just been corresponding with Ms. Citron, and she's having some issues connecting to Zoom right now. Perhaps while she's connecting, I think we had agreed to call Ms. O'Neill by speakerphone. So I could try calling her in the meantime if you like.
Yeah, please do that.
All right, just give me 1 minute. Madam Chair, I think that we're ready for Ms. O'Neill. Ms. O'Neill, whenever you're ready.
Test 1 2, test 1 2.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry and apologize to the whole commission for all the technological problems I was having this morning and still have at times. But anyways, I just want to say I really appreciate your support, and I didn't catch the gentleman's name who caught the 2.2.5. That would have been quite interesting to have that little mistake in the document. So thank you to all the staff and the people that are overseeing this project, and the Tepesquay community. I know Sabata Canyon and countywide teams are so grateful that the commission is denying these types of projects, and we are doing our best to encourage the Board of Supervisors to not overrule your findings. And so when all these projects have come before the commission and you've denied some of them, and then the board gets them and the growers appeal to the board, and then the board allows them, there's something really truly wrong with that. Truly wrong. So we appreciate our commissioner's support of responsible cannabis and having it in appropriate areas, and we encourage our commissioners and the Board of Supervisors to prohibit all cannabis, commercial cannabis, in EDRNs like Tepesquay, Sabata. And thank you so much for putting up with all the stuff. A big shout out to David Villalobos. I actually need a different contact because David's always been my... Oh, good. It's an incoming call that doesn't apply. Anyway, David, thank you so much. And if you could shoot me at some point when you have time, a contact that I can, so I don't disturb you during these hearings, that would be very, very appreciated. Thank you for listening to me, commissioners, and all the other wonderful support our county staff is doing in regard to everything that's going on in our county right now, which is what I was going to speak to a general public, but that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill, and we all love our Mr. Villalobos, that is for sure. Okay, and do we have Ms. Citron available yet?
Madam Chair, apologies. I did get another email from Ms. Citron, and she said that she hasn't been able to connect. So if you wouldn't mind making another exception for Ms. Citron, I can connect to her as well.
By phone? Okay, sure. Let's do that.
Chair Bradley, while we're waiting for Ms. Citron.
Yes, Commissioner Farini.
I had a question back on staff's recommendation. He added some language that's not in the final memo, and there was one addition he was asking that be included. I was wondering if he could go back over that for me.
Oh, Mr. Peterson, can you respond?
Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioners, Commissioner Farini. That one change was for finding 2.2.5, and there was a slight typo there. If you take a look at 2.2.5, the non-bolded second half of it, there are 4 lines there. In the 4th line of it, starting the 4th line, there's the word incompatible. That word should be compatible, because we want to say that the commission finds that the project is not compatible with the surrounding area.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I love this digital era because I just got a text from Ms. Carlson that said that there was a letter submitted, I think, by the attorney for her team. But we all received that and read it. So I think Mr. Villalobos, was that requested to be read into the record?
Madam Chair, just before I answer that question, I just want to let you know that I have Ms. Citron on the line and she's ready to go whenever we get there. But yes, she emailed me as well. Ms. Carlson emailed me as well. Yes, so I think this one is a little bit different because it came from a member of the applicant team, and I think the applicant has been given an opportunity to speak. But yes, they have requested that the item be read into the record, and I'm prepared to do so.
Okay, so you know what? We've got Ms. Citron on the phone, and I think she's probably having digital issues. So let's go to Ms. Citron with public comment and then go back and read that letter into the record. It's not the most fluid thing, but we're doing the best we can. So, Ms. Citron, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead. Ms. Citron, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I apologize for the technical issues. I have not had this problem before. Thank you very much for bearing with me, and I appreciate your consideration, Chair Bridley. Good morning. My name is Anna Citron with the law office of Mark Shatillo. We represent Lee and Ronnie Johnson, two of the many neighbors that have testified to your commission about this project's incompatibility with the neighborhood. We really appreciate your commission listening to our concerns and your diligence in working through the many issues that have been raised. The denial findings, as revised, are robust, and while we can always find other issues to include, at this point we urge you to move forward, adopt the findings for denial, and deny this project today. Looking at the findings, it's apparent that these questions of compatibility with surrounding land uses really need to be asked each time a cannabis cultivation permit comes forward. Projects that don't raise community concern with respect to their location and operations should be approved. But, and I think this project is a good example, you do need to at least ask the neighbors, ask the questions, hear from the affected community, and go through this public process, because many concerns only come to light in that context. It's our hope that the Board of Supervisors will recognize this and follow your recommendation to require CUPs for all cannabis cultivation projects. Finally, I would just add, echoing the remarks by the prior speaker, and I know you'll be considering these issues more in the next agenda item. But should there be an appeal of this project, we hope that staff will ensure that their recommendation to the board follows the direction from your commission and reflects all of the hard work that you put into to these findings. So thank you very much, and appreciate the opportunity to comment, and again for your making an exception to allow me to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Citron. Okay, that brings it back. Does staff have any rebuttal that they want to add to the public comment section?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Not seeing anything. Okay. Then we're closing the public comment portion of the meeting, and we would move to...
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry?
Hold up here. We still
that's right.
we have the letter, and we do have another potential public speaker on Zoom. I've had someone calling in via phone that's because they're calling in via Zoom, there's no name associated with it. But I think that just to be careful, we should open it up for, allow them to speak and see if this is the item that they are interested in speaking to.
Okay.
So it's going to be a little strange, but all I see is a phone number. If you have a phone number with area code 707 and wanted to speak to this item, go ahead. I've unmuted you so you can speak if you like. I guess that's a no. Thank you for allowing me to try. Would you like me to go to the letter?
Yeah, please read the applicant's letter.
Okay, let me just pull that up really quick. All right, so this letter is...
I'm sorry, Commissioner Park, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, is it not in the record already?
So,
Well,
Madam Chair, like all of the records, all of the letters that where we have a request to read them into the record, yes, they're all part of the record, but in addition to that, being part of the record and being sent electronically to the planning commissioners, people have the opportunity to request that their item be read into the record if it's 250 words or 250 words or less, and there was a request for this one.
Okay, so it's 250 words or less. Great. Thank you.
Great. So this letter is submitted by Bradley Johnson of Harrison, Templador, Hungerford, and Johnson, who appears to be representing the applicant. They requested that this letter be read into the record. Dear Chair Bridley and Commissioners, the project referenced above is agendized for the Planning Commission's June 10th hearing. This will be the project's fourth hearing before the Commission. The sole purpose of the June 10th hearing is for the Commission to formally deny the project based on findings that they are not supported by the facts or the law. We understand that the Commission agenda intends to reopen the public hearing for the project prior to taking its prearranged denial vote. No legal basis exists for such action. The Commission already closed a public hearing twice, in fact, and no new information has been submitted by the applicant, and no substantial changes have been made to the project since the May 29th hearing that would warrant additional public comment. Reopening the public hearing on the project will result in further infringement on the applicant's right to due process, and a fair hearing underscores the Commission's unfair, improper, and biased treatment of this project and its applicants. Very truly yours, Harrison, Templador, Hungerford, and Johnson, by Bradley Johnson.
Thank you. Okay, that definitely concludes the public comment portion of the meeting, and I would bring it back to the staff, well, actually to the Commission for discussion. I don't see anybody raising hands or with questions for staff, so it's to our pleasure for deliberations. I'm guessing Commissioner Perini is going to pop up there. Yes, Commissioner Perini.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. I'm ready to move forward with a motion as soon as our other commissioners have had a chance to speak.
I have a couple comments, and it might engender questions, but I normally go last. So do we have any other commissioners that are going to speak to the findings?
This is Commissioner Blau. I'll go. Enough said.
Okay.
Enough said. Let's get a motion. I'm prepared to second it. We've done this enough. Let's get this thing done and let them appeal to the board and get it out of our hair.
Okay. Thank you. And Commissioner Park?
No, I join with Commissioner Blau. I do recall that when we last heard this, that Commissioner Perini specified certain findings he wanted in these findings. And I just want to be sure that it's suitable to him. And otherwise, that's fine with me.
Very good. Okay, so Commissioner Perini, I just had a couple questions. And it's more, your district and all the farming that you're so familiar with, and I'm not. On finding 2.1.1, the last third of the paragraph, it cites the amount of grading, 40,000 cubic yards of cut and 46,660 of fill. And that's actually being used as an incompatible thing. But on a 100-acre site, was that your intention, that amount of cut and fill on that larger parcel belongs to the incompatible finding?
I think the finding represents what we were trying to say, is in this project, most of that grading is not for farming. It's for the placement of the very large building, which is also, we all agreed was incompatible with the neighborhood, characteristics.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then I had one other, just feedback is I have always not 2.1.5 paragraph 3. This talks about the number of harvests per year and the peak estimated traffic of up to 132 daily trips during those planting seasons. And then the finding goes on to cite that as being incompatible. And I'm a little concerned that we keep this in the finding, because if, in general, farming on 100-acre parcels generates more than 130 trips, to me, that seems like a reasonable generation from this size of a farm. And also, I don't think we have any evidence in the record that the accident data or addition of traffic on the roadway was substantiated by the California Highway Patrol or the county. I love the video at the last hearing about, the person going down the street. So I agree that it's not convenient and to the neighborhood, but I'm nervous about putting in this kind of evidentiary language in the findings. So I kind of wanted to ask if anyone else had that same concern, or if you were comfortable with it, then I'll defer to you, Bishop Green.
I agree with you, Chair Bridley. I don't think that language belongs in the findings.
So really, on that third paragraph, under finding 2.1.5, the sentence beginning the anticipated volume of traffic, all the way down to the end of the sentence, case of an emergency, could be stricken, and I would feel much better about this scientifically.
So we can put that back to staff. Can they take that language out for us?
Commissioner Farini, through the chair, yes, we can remove that language.
Right.
And do you need further clarification, or did you get it all from Chair Bridley?
I believe we have received everything we need from Chair Bridley. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lair. Okay, so those are the only changes, corrections. Then did you make a motion, Bishop Green? I forgot.
No, Chair Bridley. I wanted to make sure you got all your information and changes in. So
you are so kind.
Now we're ready to move forward. And yes, so my motion would be to make the required findings for denial of the project as stated in staff's June 10th recommendation. We have the language modification or deletion that you just stated on the traffic. Staff has agreed to strike that. And then we need to include the modification to 2.2.5 as recommended by staff today at this presentation.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any other hand raised for discussion on the motion, I would ask Mr. Villalobos to do the roll call vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Park.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
And Chair Bridley.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, everyone. Good job. By the way, Mr. Peterson, thank you very much. Long run.
Thank you, Chair Bridley.
Okay. So now we move to our last item on the agenda, which is our discussion item. And I don't know if staff may be anything. I think it's just a discussion item. Is there any PowerPoint or presentation? I think we're just discussing it, correct?
Hey, Madam Chair, this is Secretary Wilson. This item was placed on the agenda at a request from the Commission in order to have a discussion regarding the Planning Development Department's process when we're taking appeals of the Planning Commission decisions to the Board of Supervisors. I believe there's some other related items in that process or procedure that we wanted to talk about. Staff does not have a presentation today in regards to that. Staff is ready to respond to any questions or comments from the Commission in regards to this process and any clarification on that process. On that, just as a preamble, when applications are filed for appeals of the Planning Commission decision, staff prepares a response to those appeal issues in a board agenda letter that captures the appeal issues and responses to those appeal issues, and as well as providing a response a recommendation to the board. I think over the last several appeals, they have been a little bit anomalies as to what has typical practices of the department is forwarding the commission's recommendations to the board to consider. I think because the project staff had provided a number of potential motions for the board to consider. I think the discussion today is how to capture fully what the planning commission's decisions and deliberations were as those items go forward to the board of supervisors. And I think maybe Director Plowman may have some comments before we begin as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Madam Chair, members of the commission. I think Mr. Wilson summarized the issue that had been raised by some of the commissioners quite well. We did have a meeting with the chair and the vice chair to discuss it and talk about the process and how we transition from the planning commission to the board of supervisors, particularly on these cannabis cases. Mr. Wilson was going to be doing a little bit of research, but we didn't have time to complete that for this hearing, but we were wanted to come back with some information just about the difference in the findings between the LUP and the CUP. But I think that by and large, the commission understands the difference in the findings, and which is what resulted in the recommendation for the cannabis ordinance to convert land use permits to conditional use permits for all cannabis cases. So perhaps that's not necessary in the long run, but that was something we had discussed when the chair and the vice chair met with staff. So we're really ready to listen and hear what the issues are, or questions or concerns, and be able to try and provide a response to the commission and see if we can't work out a process that addresses some of those issues and concerns that have been raised.
Thank you, Director Plowman. So it's back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Farini, I see a hand up, but you're muted. Do you mean to be speaking or wanting to speak? Okay. So does any commissioner want to pose questions of staff or discuss this further? It was our request to put it on the agenda. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Commissioner Park.
Yeah, I certainly want to discuss it, but it's not by way of questions of staff. I think this was generated by planning commissioners and their concerns, and I was the most vocal. So I'd like to vocalize those concerns, but not as questions to staff.
That's fine.
So are we there to do that?
Go ahead. Yep.
Yes, I do agree with Mr. Wilson. This is somewhat anomalous. It's rare that we have this kind of situation occur. And what I mean by this kind of situation is, in these cannabis appeals, uniformly, our determinations have taken a lot of time, a lot of effort to work out. We conditions for projects and not just deny them when we had concerns. And we found that when our matters were appealed, that uniformly staff recommended something different from what the Planning Commission had decided. And I'd never seen that before. I was really surprised. I was disappointed. I'm not criticizing staff. They need to do what they need to do professionally. It just was unusual to me. And some of the feedback was that we, including me, were rogue commissioners. We weren't following the law. We weren't doing the right thing, and even staff didn't support what we were doing, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't like hearing that, because I've had a career of over 40 years of trying to apply the law. So I'm sensitive to that, and I'm sensitive to my fellow commissioners. We're not rogues. We're trying to do the best we can. A concern I have in particular is that the nuances, the effort that's in our determinations, are they being properly transmitted? Because I wonder if someone who disagrees with our determination can adequately convey to the board really what it is and the reasons behind it. And that's why after we discuss, how people feel about this and what they think, then I think we should also have a discussion of some practical suggestions. And those are suggestions that I made when I first brought this up, and I've put it in emails to your meeting. So I hope to get to that at a later point. So that frames the issue for me.
Okay, and I see Commissioner Blau.
Yeah, and I must tell you, Commissioner Park, I was frustrated the first time that the staff went to the board on an appeal, and the staff had a different recommendation than the PC did. Although I've learned over the past 13 years that's not unusual. I've been told by staff, look, they're professionals, they're trained, they have their opinion. The fact that they think they have a moral obligation to give the board their professional recommendation. However, I have in the past always seen where the staff was very careful in telling the board that the planning commission did not agree with staff, which I think is what they need to do. Do I like it? I don't know. My frustration doesn't actually come from that issue. My frustration comes from the fact that it takes so long for the board to hear an appeal or decision. I don't get this 6 months or a year sometimes before the board hears an appeal on the decision we made. And I get the staff, they said, okay, so they do their presentation to us, we hear the issue, we make a recommendation, get the appeal. Now the staff thinks they need to take 2, 3, 4, I don't know how long, in order to prepare new staff report for the board. I don't get that. I don't get why staff doesn't make the same presentation to the board that they made to the planning commission to make the decision. If there are minor additional issues, great. But what takes months in order to have the hearing? The other thing that frustrates me, and it's probably not staff's ability to control, but I don't get where the board, where they have to post the item for the board and they set a hearing date going forward. Kind of like, what are you doing here? I mean, you have to agendize the fact that there's going to be an appeal, then to approve, and set a date for it. So everything takes months instead of weeks. That's my concern.
I'm not seeing anyone's hand up, but I have a clarifying question for Commissioner Blau. You said that you were concerned that the board presentation didn't include the same presentation that was made to the Planning Commission, right?
I'm saying staff, what they do, yeah, they make a different presentation to the board than was made to the commission. In other words, the appellate will state 5 reasons why we were wrong in our decision, and then they take months to analyze those 5 things they appealed. I don't get that. And I don't understand why it would take several months in order to staff to respond to those issues that they appeal.
Okay. I have a hunch about that, is that the Planning Commission's turning over the leaf and trying to struggle with these land use permits. Look, what came out of our commission was nobody concurred that the land use permit process is the right application for these cannabis cases, right? I mean, we had a unanimous vote on CUPs as being the better permit tool. So in the meantime, with all these appeals, we were sort of struggling with dealing with an LUP with a limited focus and set of findings. And I think that we sort of treated them like a CUP or a DP anyway. And we've heard back from staff several times that when you have an LUP, you have to you have a much more truncated set of findings. So one of the reasons I can imagine, and I've actually heard it from a couple of the cannabis agents, is they were moving toward, maybe they were deemed complete and they were moving toward a hearing, and then the Planning Commission brought up another issue. They brought up a question about the virus system. They brought up, a setback from the property line. Whatever it was we were doing in our deliberations as part of our good work, then rolled back to staff, and then they started asking for more information from the appellant. So it's kind of an iterative process, and I know Commissioner Blau, I really appreciate that you're just frustrated with how long it takes to get anything through the county. I see that it's all part of one big wheel of a lot of people trying to deal with these cases that are an awkward fit with the permit path we have. So I'm not sure if that's helpful in any way, but I'm looking for other feedback.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I want to let the commission have their full discussion, and I'm trying to figure out when the best time to answer some of these questions. If the commission wants to talk a little bit more, that's fine, or I can try and respond to Commissioner Blau's comment now. It's your preference.
Well, we have Commissioner Park back up, so maybe after this. I'm open to what the rest of the commission wants to do, but Commissioner Park?
I have a follow-up to what Commissioner Blau just said, but if Director Plowman wants to step in and clarify something, I think I'd invite that or make my comment.
Okay. So I think there's a few reasons why it takes sometimes a few months to get up to the board. One is structurally the review process that's embedded in the department that requires a certain amount of lead time before anything gets docketed with the board, and review times with county council, etc. So that's one item that we just deal with on any item, not just bills. But the other thing that results in delays are, and the reason we don't have the same staff report is that we prepare staff reports on appeals focused on the appeal. So we draw a lot of information from the Planning Commission staff report, but the bulk of the board letter is about the appeal and the appeal issues that are raised by the appellant. The other, so that's one issue. And sometimes that can take a period of time depending on what the issues are that are raised. The other is making sure we can find dates for the appellant and the applicant. We've had a number of cases where we've had difficulty finding a date that worked for both parties. And that has resulted in multiple delays on a couple of cases. So that's been a real challenge for us. And in fact, we've been discussing that at the board level is, how much of kicking the can down the road can we accept in the process if people are not making themselves available. And so that's a challenge that we're dealing with, and we try and work with everybody to accommodate their schedules. But so those are a couple of the reasons why it takes longer than it seems on the surface that it should. I understand his frustration. Our review process is lengthy, and getting things on the calendar can be challenging. And so we look at those items and try and make improvements to our process on a pretty regular basis. But hopefully that gives you some context.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could step in on provide some supplement to Director Plowman's comment. There's other things that happen behind the scenes when an item gets appealed from the Planning Commission to the board. And one of those items is facilitation, and we're talking just general projects on a high level today. And so that is another thing that happens once projects get appealed to the board is there's a requirement that they at least they're offered an opportunity to facilitate the issues. And sometimes that takes multiple meetings or scheduling to have both parties in the room to discuss it. If they waive that facilitation, then we can move it forward faster. But other times there is some scheduling to have that facilitation occur. And that is something that's like common knowledge that everybody's aware of, I think, on the commission. So there's like multiple steps. I agree with Commissioner Blau that if we could get things to the board faster, it would keep things moving. However, there are some things internally that we do, and if it could get resolved through facilitation, then that's good. Commissioner Blau did indicate the set hearing process, and that's outside our control, and where we have to set a hearing to have a hearing. And that's outside of our control. And then, as Director Palman indicated, depending on the length of the appeal issues, it does take us a little bit of time to respond to all the appeal issues. So that's a little bit of a background on what goes into responding to appeals that go to the Board of Supervisors.
And one more thing that, Madam Chair, that I just wanted to add to respond to Mr. Parks or Commissioner Parks' comments. I understand the frustration, and I think that the department has to own some of the issue here, in that we could have done a better job of laying out the commission's position and recommendation. I think there was a real focus on the appeal and getting it to the board, but it left a little bit to be desired in terms of what happened at the commission, how much effort they put into something. I appreciate what Commissioner Blau said about, that the planners in the department are professionals and they feel obligated to provide their professional opinion to the board, and sometimes that may differ from what the Planning Commission does. But there's a certain amount of artfulness to explaining why there's a difference and spending a little bit of time on that, and I think we could do a better job of that.
I'll weigh in again.
Thank you. Commissioner Blau?
The one thing I would appreciate from staff is, if you are going to make a recommendation that's going to be different from the Planning Commission, you need to know that in advance. Because when I know that in advance, I contact my supervisor and I explain to them in greater detail why I made the decision I made, or why the commission made the decision they made. What we don't like, and what I don't appreciate, is not knowing that the staff is going to make a different recommendation to the board than the recommendation that the commission made. So I think that's important. In the cases in the past where, most of the time I can remember, when I've done that, the board ends up making the same decision that the commission. It is unusual that they don't go along with what the Planning Commission did, but again, I would just appreciate if the staff is going to make a different recommendation than what the commission put forward. Let us know that, have an opportunity to spend the time, contact our supervisors, and let them know how we feel and why we made the decision we made. Does that make sense?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Blau, I think that's a fair request. Yeah, I think that will help the process.
I see Commissioner Cooney has his hand raised, and Commissioner Parks, in that order.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been doing this for quite a while now, and I have to admit, back in the beginning, it was still part of this century, but it was a long time ago. I would see cases go to the board that the Planning Commission had labored over, maybe even come to a unanimous decision on, and in the board discussion, they would spend a great deal less time considering a matter than the Planning Commission did, and it concerned me that there were important pieces of information that weren't given attention. But somewhere along the line early on, I went to a board meeting and sat there with the idea that if any of the board members cared what the Planning Commission decided and why, they could ask me to come to the microphone and explain it. And I thought and think even more emphatically today that we are much like a court system where you have a trial judge that hears the evidence and renders a decision, and then the matter is appealed to the Court of Appeal. And there is no role for the trial judge beyond the trial. And I believe now that there is no role for the commission as a body once a matter is appealed to the Board of Supervisors. If the board finds merit in what the Planning Commission did, they have the ability to refer the matter back to us, but they're certainly able to go on and make their decision, and that's the system we have. And I think it works. It works generally the way it should. The decisions are carefully considered at both bodies, and staff does a good job of linking the two together. And I know everybody realizes this, but when a matter is before the board, the entire Planning Commission decision, as well as the documents before the Planning Commission, are provided to the board. And we can go on and see exactly what staff said about the Planning Commission, maybe just reported the vote, maybe indicated the Planning Commission findings and what kinds of things were there. But there is a great deal of information provided to the board, and they have the responsibility to take into account not only our decision and the decision of the Board of Architectural Review that might apply as well, but they have different issues to consider than planning issues. They're responsible for the public purse and how it's either filled or emptied. So, I think I could pick and talk about specific cases where I didn't think it worked right. But I have to say, certainly the case under the lengthy time period of the directors that I've worked with, there is an excellent presentation to the board. The board members are political animals, and they react according to some issues that the Planning Commission never dealt with. So that's the system we have. I think it works pretty well, all things considered.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Commissioner Park?
I'm going to follow up on what Commissioner Cooney said, but also what Commissioner Blau said. And Commissioner Blau's comment that I wanted to follow up on was not on the length of the process, but on different presentations being made by staff to the board as compared to the Planning Commission, but also to Commissioner Cooney's comments about the whole system. An overarching concern for me has been the integrity of our planning apparatus. And by planning apparatus, I mean all of us. I mean the Planning Commission, planning staff, county council, all of us together. I want us to have credibility with the public. And I've been in this town since I was born at Cottage Hospital and practicing for 40 plus years. And unfortunately, I've heard a lot of pot shots at the process, pot shots at staff, pot shots at the overall process, and so on and so forth. And I've never really liked that. And so I think that we sometimes are the most effective in defending the integrity of the whole process when we do our best to cooperate with each other. We had an anomalous issue on these cannabis appeals, and it deals with conditioning LUPs. I'm very comfortable with my own interpretation there because I see so much reference in the zoning ordinance to conditions for LUPs and to expiration of LUPs and so forth. I don't need to argue that today. We had on this at the Planning Commission, and different advice went to the Board of Supervisors. I kind of get why that happened. It's a little ironic because on our very first cannabis case we heard, the most experienced planning attorney, land use attorney in this county who represented the applicant said, and you can look at the video, that you can as extensively condition an LUP as a CUP.